Hello guys, how you doing? Simon Gibson here, reporting for duty. The podcast is Successful and Come Calling, which is the podcast for people who want to be better tomorrow than they were today. I'm just on my way to the podcast studio, and my guest this week for episode 4 is Jessica Toomey. Jess is managing director of the Frog and Bucket nightclub and comedy brand. She's also one of the leaders of the Women's Comedy Festival, which is the only one of its kind throughout Europe. I'm really looking forward to asking Jess about the fabulous history of the Frog and Bucket Comedy Club, about the many comedians who've started their career there before going on to achieve such successful things. And I also want to ask Jess about her commitment for improving the well-being of comedy performers, particularly female comedy performers, in light of some of the awful instances that have occurred in recent years. Finally, I want to ask Jess about how COVID has been with her, and of course how she's managed to build the resilience that everyone in the entertainment business has needed to both survive and come out positively. So that's Jessica Toomey I'm going to be talking to. This is Successful and Come Calling. Relax, enjoy the episode.
Right, excellent. Jess, thanks for doing this. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for asking me.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Good. So, obviously, you know that I really love Frog and Bucket brand. Really love the club, what you guys have done. Looking forward to speaking to you about what the journey's been like in the sort of years you've been running the show. And obviously how the last year's been, particularly in this really difficult time for the whole of the comedy industry. But first of all, we do guest rider on the podcast. We drink what the guest wants, and you're not letting your northern roots down. We've got a nice cup of tea, haven't we?
Yeah, I did want a sambuca, but we're driving, so a good cup of Yorkshire tea.
Yeah, very nice.
Made very well, by the way.
Yes, thank you, Vicky. Thank you. And I mean, it is 12 o'clock, isn't it? So I know they say it's 5 o'clock somewhere, but I think it's a bit early even for us. So your background, when did you get involved in the comedy business?
Weirdly, not out of choice. I had my own business. I've got a degree in architecture. But my brother was running the Frog and Bucket. My uncle, was running the Frog and Bucket with my dad. And he fell into a coma for 40 days. And my dad was just beside himself. So he literally just gave me the keys. And I just got thrown in the deep end and just had to step in and take over.
That's incredible.
But I wouldn't choose any other job now.
No, I mean, it comes across. So when you did that, when you were thrown in at the deep end, was the Frog and Bucket? So what year was that?
That was 17 years ago.
Oh well, okay. So it really was, but it was a fully functioning comedy club then. It's 27 years old now, so it'd been going 10 years before I joined. Funny enough, when I took over the Frog, I was the same age as my dad when he opened the Frog. Really?
Yeah.
And the thing when I did comedy, which obviously wasn't for some years now and wasn't with any degree of success, but I did a number of nights at the Frog, and I've got to say it's a very friendly club. It's a nice environment in there. It always seemed like a nice team of people who work there. Is that something you find yourself?
The Frog is built on people.
Yeah.
I've got a great team. Even Colin's been with us 21 years. My venue manager that I'd be lost without, he's been with us 15 years. So I think the key is just surrounding yourself with good people.
Well, I think that's the key to any successful business.
Yeah.
I mean, doing what we do, the quality of people you got working doesn't just make your life easier, it helps you succeed. And I mean, that was definitely my impression with the Frog.
Well, you enjoy your work as well, more if you like who you're working with.
You do.
Makes a massive difference.
Oh, it does. The thing which the Frog, I think, is famous for, from certainly in my eyes, is being the launching pad for so many incredibly successful comedians and indeed people who've gone on to do things other than comedy. So maybe first of all, you could just tell people what it is that the Frog does to make that possible, and maybe some of the names who've passed through over the years.
I think age is the main thing. I think we're the longest running dedicated comedy club out of London. So we naturally got that history. It's also very accessible in terms of like John Bishop. He'd just split up with his wife, and he was a travelling salesman, pharmaceutical rep, and he was wandering through Manchester on a Monday night, not knowing where to go. And there wasn't much to do on a Monday in Manchester, so he wandered into ours, not knowing what it was, and was asking why some people there were getting free drinks, and we explained, well, they're the acts. So he said, well, let me up, because he wanted a free drink. He got up on stage and just bitched about his ex-wife for 20 minutes and didn't look back. And I think a lot of it actually, Caroline Ahern, we've got to thank a lot for. When we first started out, she started coming down when we were completely unknown. And then that kind of created a bit of interest, and The Guardian was still in Manchester. There was a lot of media. So they all started coming down. And I think things just very organically grew from there. It was the place to be or go if really out of London.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely... it's the brand that the Frog had when I did comedy. I mean, just going back to John Bishop. So when he came along that night, had he ever done comedy before?
Never done comedy in his life. Not sure if he'd ever been to a comedy show. My favourite bit about this story is I've never known anyone progress so quickly. I don't think even Peter Kay progressed that quickly, but within a few months, he was able to quit his pharmaceutical job, which you imagine was paid very well.
Yes.
He didn't tell anyone. No one knew. And then one night, I think he was doing like a one-man show at the Frog. And unbeknown to him, his ex-wife was in the audience. Unbeknown to her, John Bishop was on stage. And they got back together, and they've been happily married ever since.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Wow, well, just comedy can heal the scars, you see.
Yeah. I love how many couples have got together at the Frog. So many acts have met the wives at the Frog.
Is that right?
Yeah, Alex Boardman met his wife when he performed New Year's Eve. Loads. Yeah.
Do you know
Not
what
all of them made it, but...
Do you know what? My story is the opposite, because one of the reasons I packed in comedy was because my wife said she was going to divorce me if I got stuck into her on stage anymore.
It's not an easy job for a relationship.
No.
No.
So you mentioned Peter Kay there. I mean, Peter was another one who sort of earned his initial stripes at the Frog, didn't he?
Yeah, but Jack Whitehall, there's quite a lot, but that's probably down to Manchester being one of the largest university cities.
Yeah.
So a lot of these are at uni and then give comedy a go, or Peter Kay, he was studying at Salford, performing arts, I think. And we have a lot of ties with these as well. So we always do the Salford Comedy Degree Showcase. So I think that naturally brings in fresh new talent. Yeah, I'm trying to... There's so many names, my mind's just gone blank.
Well, no, I mean Johnny...
Lucy Porter,
Johnny
was at
Vegas.
Manchester Uni. Yeah.
Johnny Vegas is another one, isn't he?
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, because obviously we're going back some years there. Am I right in thinking that the sort of open mic circuit, open mic night, for those who aren't familiar, is basically a comedy night where amateur comics, which is what I was, go along and perform, and is the starting point for them to begin to build their careers.
I think it's pretty much everyone's first gig. It was Louisa Romelon's first gig, who has a BAFTA. It was one of Sophie Willen's first gig that has a BAFTA. What really shocked me was in lockdown, when we were really struggling and I was at risk of losing the club, we didn't get the Cultural Renewal Fund. And the Arts Council were trying to push a really positive social media message, like, we're here for culture, and everyone had to tweet it. And it got hijacked by every high-profile comedian you could think of in the UK. Just tweeting, going mad, going, anyone worth their salt in comedy has played this venue. And it was so humbling because we've missed so many people we didn't know their first gig was with us, and how much it meant, or actually how pivotal we are to English comedy. Yeah.
Well, let's unpack this a bit, because I was aware of this, because I remember that it actually got to the stage where the Frog and Bucket was mentioned in Prime Minister's questions, wasn't it? In terms of...
that was prior to that. That was right at the start of lockdown. Where I was really panicking that comedy wasn't recognised. Our business rates were too high to get the grant that every pub and restaurant was getting.
Right.
And I was like, we're going to get completely missed under the radar here. So I harassed Lucy Powell, our MP, who's been brilliant. And she mentioned it the next day in PMQs to say, the Frog and Bucket, what are you going to do for places like the Frog and Bucket? And it did make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose everyone will know this anyway, but the backdrop here is COVID struck. The businesses which were clearly going to be the most significantly affected were those which involved large groups of people packing into relatively small spaces or enclosed spaces, certainly. Yeah. And obviously, comedy clubs definitely fit that category. Just winding back to that period, sort of a year or so ago, obviously, like us all, you saw this awful pandemic coming, and we were all very concerned from a health perspective. When did it, from a business perspective, when did you think, right, this is more than just, a bit of short-term collateral damage, this is really significant?
I am so embarrassed about my naivety looking back on it. We voluntarily closed before we were forced to close. And that's been a weird thing for businesses, is you have to think for yourself what's right and not be told by the government.
Yeah.
And it's a bit weird, like going, no, I'm shutting my business, I'm not being forced to, but you have to make that judgment. I naively kept Easter on sale.
but no, to be
we
fair,
shut at the start of March, and I kept Easter on sale, thinking, right, everyone just bunker down. We'll have this done in a month.
But we all thought that, didn't we?
I think, yeah.
I don't think you were being naive. I mean, we did the same as you in our business. We had people working from home, and the offices shut before lockdown, and it was because we said, well, number one, we don't want the government telling us, and number two, our concern is not following the regulations; it's looking after our team.
Yeah.
So I think it was the right thing to do. But just in terms of when that sort of hit you, that unfortunately Easter 2020 and quite a number of months thereafter were going to be pretty desolate from the point of view of the club being open. How were you feeling at that point in terms of how you needed to tackle that problem?
The stress was overwhelming. Thankfully, the business had never been in such a strong financial position. So we had decent cash reserves. But I think once it got to May and it's dwindling and nothing's coming in and there's been no offer of grants or anything yet, I was really panicking. The banks were really taking the time approving these loans. And no one could get that business interruption loan at first. Thank God the bounce back loan came through. But I was like, oh my God, there's something that it's 26 years that's been passed on to me. I'm gonna lose it. I'm like, I've only had full control for a few years, and I'm going to throw it all away. You just felt really out of control of the whole situation. Yeah.
That's how I felt in terms of our business. So I really can empathise with that, because what caused me anxiety wasn't so much the fact that there was going to be an impact on the business, and that was clear, or even it wasn't that, we can't quite be certain exactly what that impact will be just yet. It was that it felt as if a year, 2 years down the line, that was uncertain as well. I mean, is that the way you were feeling?
I was, massively uncertain that even after this, would we recover? Would people remember us? Would things change, such as Netflix? And would society still want to go out as much once they're used to staying in? There's just so many questions. But in July, when there was talk of being able to open again in August, the government had to do a pilot study. And we were asked to do that pilot study. And the demand for those tickets was phenomenal.
Really?
Yeah. We've never had so many hits for one show ever. And it wasn't a special show as such. I did do an all-female lineup.
I remember it was Janice Connolly, wasn't it? Was on,
and Kerry Pritchard McLean and Shazia Mercer. So that was the boost I need to go. No, actually, comedy hasn't died. It will always be there's a massive demand for it. And as far as I know, every comedy club that opened last week has had sellout shows. Every show's been a sellout.
Well, has there ever been a time when we've needed a laugh more than now?
Yeah, definitely.
And so. I mean, I totally think you're right insofar as I think it'll be about having not enough seats and not enough nights in the week.
That's why we're all selling out, because we're only at half capacity. But I think comedy is a great way to deal with trauma and things. Society's actually quite traumatised by what's happened in the last year, and comedy helps you deal with that and break it down and come to terms with it and find a lighter side to it.
It does. It's so interesting this, because we had Sam Avery on the podcast. Obviously Sam's a stand-up and a writer, but he's moved into actually providing training for businesses using comedy to do exactly what you've described, Jess, in terms of moving negative situations forward. And I mean, that's where I've always, because if you're in like a cycle of negativity, you've got to break it, haven't you? And I think comedy is all about positivity. It's about interaction. It's about engagement. And I hope that the powers that be recognise that it's not just the comedy industry, it's entertainment generally. It has got a key role to play in getting us back to normality. It's not just about, supporting the businesses and getting the businesses back on track is critical and, the right thing to do. But there is a strong social case for us not going back now.
Yeah.
On
and
what
it's really unifying. We've got 100 people in a room and they're all collectively laughing at something. They're all in something together. And everyone's felt very isolated and alone for the last year. And then suddenly you're with a big group and you're all on board together with something that's really been missing for a lot of people last year.
It has. And it's that unification which I think is crucial, because who hasn't during this period had their sort of social confidence impacted? I mean, I was thinking the other day, what was it? Oh yeah, someone asked me to just go for a pint. And it wasn't that I didn't want to go. And it wasn't that I was concerned about health implications. I just sort of thought, oh, God, really? And I thought to myself, well, before COVID, I'd have been out the door. And it's that adjustment to normality that I don't think there'll be very many people who won't be in a position where they've got to do a bit of that. So comedy, I think, and entertainment and socialisation generally is is
I think
important.
there's two types of people: the ones who've got used to staying in now, and buying your cheap 12-pack,
Yeah.
and don't want to now have to go back out and spend £5 a pint. Not that we charge that much. And then the others who it's like every night's New Year's Eve. Like, let's go.
What? Because obviously you were able to find some ways in which to keep what you guys do on the road during COVID, didn't you? Did you say you did some form of streaming in terms of
Yeah.
Frog?
So it was actually when we got turned down for the Cultural Renewal Fund. I did a GoFundMe. And then I was able to approach the National Lottery and say, "Can you match fund me?
Right.
We've raised this money." And yeah, so they subsidized, they helped us get all the equipment that was needed. Because the last thing you want to do is put yourself under more financial risk of it's expensive kit, and if you're doing it, you've got to do it right.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were able to assist us with doing that. I would have liked to have done it sooner. It was just raising the money to have done it. But going forward, that's something that will stay.
You're going to continue to do that?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's great. So is that because you've tapped into a sort of a comedy audience who wouldn't necessarily go to a comedy club?
I think from a business point of view, it's something that's very scalable. I'm always going to be limited by the square footage of my building and how many seats I can fit in it.
Yeah.
So, whereas streaming, there is no limit. If I can reach an international audience, that's a real way to grow the business. Not quite there yet.
No, but you're right about scalability. Because I mean, we've got businesses in Australia and the US as well, and because our business basically does technology outsourcing, so you're basically outsourcing comedy there, aren't you? In terms of you providing that access without needing to be physically present in a certain location in the northwest of England. And it just sounds clever to me that from a business perspective, I can see how that might well be a positive that emerges from this.
And then on another level, it's the accessibility. Disabled people have actually really enjoyed a lot of elements of lockdown. The Zooms, and they were suddenly able to interact with things in the same way as everyone else. And I can't, on my conscience, just take that away from him again now. So that's another element of it as well.
Well, good for you. And again, I think that's another positive to emerge from a difficult period, because you've there identified the people out there who might just not be able to get to clubs.
We've got to have learned things from the last year. We've got to as a society, we've got to have learned something and adapt and change something going forward now.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I want to come to that just in part two, just in terms of the other things you've got in the pipeline. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a break now. But we've got so much more to get through. I want to talk about the Women's Comedy Festival. I want to talk about the open air work that the Frog's doing this summer. I want to talk about the way you're bringing your brand to other clubs across the north of England. So we've got loads more to get through. We'll also be going back to talk about the old days and some of the acts that you had on at the Frog. So stick with us, guys. It's half time, but we're back very shortly with Jess.
It's half time, friends. From next week's half-time slot, I'm going to begin recommending businesses, services and products that I've used, that I like and I've got a good value from. I'm not making any of these recommendations on the basis that these businesses are paying me to do so. At this stage, I'm not considering any sort of paid sponsorships, so you can all rest assured that any recommendations that I make are genuinely because I've enjoyed working with a business, value a product, or think I've received a great service, and I'm going to give you some background behind that. I will ask the businesses to share the podcast to their social media followers and to follow us themselves, but there'll be no other value that they give to me other than that share and follow. So I hope you get value from our recommendations, which start next week. In the meantime, back to the podcast with Jess Toomey. It's good, isn't it?
Right, hello again, guys. We're back with Jess.
Hi.
Thanks again for coming. So what I was going to do is let's just take it back a little bit. We talked at the start about this reputation that the Frog and Bucket's been able to nurture over the years, and obviously we've mentioned Peter Kay, we've mentioned Johnny Vegas, John Bishop, but that ability to sort of grow new talent, which goes on, girls and guys to do fantastic things on TV and with tours and with their writing, that's continued. And obviously now you run the show, you have the opportunity to see a lot more. So when you see an act on stage who goes on to do great things, do you ever track back and think they were pretty special from the outset?
Yeah, you will know straight away that they've got something. Usually, for me, it's they walk on stage and they're instantly likeable. They're instantly everyone's best friend in the room. They don't necessarily have the material yet, but you're watching them go in there. They're 75% of the way there. Then there's other times you'll see someone that's like that writing and the way their mind works is phenomenal. Just got to hope they hone the stagecraft and that likability. It's very rare someone in their early days will have both.
Yeah.
It does happen. Josh Jones is one, actually. He's fairly new. He did a gig at the Frog, Beat the Frog, and straight away I was like, he's got it. And that year, Chortle, which is comedy's like leading publication, asked me for the one to watch. I think it was 2019, and I said Josh Jones. And then when the article came out, I was like, oh dear God, I've misunderstood the brief. All the other promoters have listed like top flight comedians who are breaking into TV. I've misunderstood the brief. I've got it wrong. But within 3 months of that, he'd been asked on to one of the panel shows on TV.
Wow.
It's not often you see someone fly like that. And it's not great for a lot of the rest of the open spots to see someone get success so quickly.
I mean, just let me ask you about that, because I remember that. When I did comedy, it was very competitive, not just of doing well, but in terms of even getting open spots was hard to do. And reminder, open spot is your amateur comedian slots. I found that side of it very difficult because as I didn't intend to do it as a career, I felt a little bit like I was treading on people's toes who were trying to climb the ladder. There just seemed too many amateur comics for the amount of spots that were available, and that did create some animosity. Is that something which still exists? Yeah,
I think really the established comedy clubs should prioritise having these open mic nights. The acts need to be in a proper venue with a proper audience, where they're getting real feedback and possibility of real progression. There's too many nights above bars, which open spots are doing, and they're just playing to the peers. And they do need that stage time. You do need your air miles to succeed in comedy. But a lot of it, you're travelling so many miles and it's not going to lead anywhere. So I do get frustrated when I see real dedicated comedy clubs not putting on these open mic nights, because if you're not allowing that entry, you're just reaping and not sowing.
Fascinating. Let's just unpack that, because I totally agree with you on this issue of the difference between doing a gig either as part of an open mic night or as an open spot between two or more professional comedians with a professional compere, fantastic club, good sound system, well-promoted night, engaged audience. the difference in the experience, even if you didn't do so well, compared to that and the above the bar with, 5 people and a dog type of thing, is huge. And I can completely see what you mean in terms of, to nurture new talent, you need to expose and give them the opportunity to be in those more professional environments. And obviously this is something the Frog and Bucket has really committed to and really invested in over the years.
The whole of the Frog and Bucket, I believe, is built on our Monday open mic night. If you don't discover and nurture that talent, then how do you get to your flagship Saturday night show with 3 headliners?
And it's fantastic that you've continued with that ethos, because, well, let me not presume, the clubs who don't do this, why don't they?
I don't know.
No.
I've never addressed it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my assumption would be that it's financially driven. They feel that, they will make more money as a club by.
But what is a club without talent?
Absolutely.
What is a comedy club without talent? So if you're not willing to invest in that talent, what are you building your whole business on?
Completely. And I mean, the fact that the Frog and Bucket brand has not just stayed around, but has thrived and as is a proper brand to me, because like I said earlier, that's what the Frog and Bucket means to me. It stands for its ability to help new talent, which goes on to do amazing things.
And that's why I've also, and I run comedy courses as well, because I realised that these open mic gong show format competitions, they don't always attract female acts. So we also started a comedy course. Again, not financially driven, just it's so important to be discovering and giving an outlet for new comics to come through the board. So,
and I know that, if that's interesting, I know that you have been a huge supporter of female comedies, huge supporter of female acts.
Yeah. And
you run the only women's comedy festival in Europe, is that right?
Yeah.
So tell me how that came about.
That came about, we always had a monthly all-female comedy night at the Frog and Bucket called Laughing Cows, which was run by my friend Hazel O'Keefe. And then 9 years ago, she started this festival. But she didn't have the resources or maybe the know-how or the business acumen to take it anywhere. So she asked me to come in and help. And then a few years ago, she just stepped down and gave it to me to take to the next level. I had great plans for it, and then lockdown happened. So it didn't happen last year. But I think there's more of a demand than ever now for this festival. So I'm really driven to make this year good.
And this year it's autumn?
Yeah, it's the 1st to the 10th of October across Manchester.
We're going to put this on our socials. I know I went to a Laughing Cows night once, and if it's sort of a sort of expanded and finessed version of that, then I'm really interested. So tell me, what is the festival? Where is it? How many days is it?
So it's 10 days. It's just across loads of venues in Manchester. Some of the flagship shows tend to be at the Frog and Bucket. It's mostly 1 hour shows. Mostly actually shows that have done well at Edinburgh that then come to the Women in Comedy Festival. I purposely do it in October so we can have the polished shows.
Of course, because the Edinburgh is August, is it?
Yeah. They'll bring that show then to the festival. I do a few mixed bill shows and competitions, and then we have a lot of like industry-led panel discussions, all sorts, yeah.
And it's do you know who's on at this stage?
No, applications are still open.
Right, okay.
So I know a few, but they're embargoed until Friday, I'm afraid.
Oh, fair enough. Don't worry. I won't get you into any trouble.
Although saying that, this will come out after then.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll tell you what, we can edit you back in. In terms of women's comedy generally, I mean, obviously, I know as I say, you're a huge advocate of it. It's been, I mean, I think from my perspective, none of the female comedians I work with had a problem in sort of standing their ground when faced with any sort of laddish behaviour from the crowd or anything like that. But having said that, I agree with you that the attracting female talent and then making sure they work in an environment that is safe and which is supportive must be something you feel quite strongly about.
Yeah, I mean, we see the pro female comics who are doing the weekend clubs and are at that level, and you think, well, they won't be intimidated by anything. They're always going to succeed in this industry. What we don't realise is they are very unique women, strong women. We didn't see how many women dropped out in the very beginning because of issues, or didn't even feel like they could step into the industry. So I think at top level, you won't see issues. They've got that power and the reputation, and they can speak out, and they're not worried that they won't advance because they're difficult. What none of us really know is the younger ones coming in completely new, what issues they had, because we're not aware of, when you get to a certain level, you're not aware or see what goes on at the very bottom of the circuit, and what they have to get past. So I've done quite a lot of research into that to find out what's putting women off at the beginning that makes them not pursue it. And I do think the industry's changing. There's a great initiative starting now called Get Off, where every comedy club in the country have signed up to a centralised HR department. So any comic or any club has any issue, we can go to this independent person who's nothing to do with comedy. And because it's full of self-employed people and freelancers, so there's no recourse for any issues to be addressed. So that's going to be a huge advancement for our industry. It's really going to make it a bit more professional.
And that I can completely see how that could work. You talked there about your research into what stops budding female comedians come into the industry. Were there any other conclusions? I mean, one of the things I'd be interested in your view on is, back when I did comedy, what always concerned me was just some of the practical implications of working in clubs. You've got late night finishes, you've got reliance on public transport, you've got the fact that people who are cutting their teeth often aren't getting paid or aren't getting paid very much. You've got this issue of car sharing, which always seemed very strange to me. Is any of those sort of practical issues, safety issues? I mean, they could apply to anyone, but is that a particular turn off for female comedians?
Yeah, because when you start out, you're not getting paid.
No.
And it's quite expensive travelling here, there and everywhere. And you've got to go quite far to get the stage time. So then they're put into situations where they've got to take car shares, or a promoter is saying, well, you can sleep on my couch. These are ultimately all strangers. You're still getting into a car for a stranger. You're still sleeping in a strange man's house. So that's always going to put a lot of women off, the way they have to get onto the circuit. Yeah.
That's understandable, isn't it? Completely. And just thinking of a solution to that, obviously, do you see anything that the industry can do in the same way as it's provided this HR solution? Can you think of any way that a solution, a practical solution, can be found from like a safety perspective? Yeah.
So the Live Comedy Association that I sit on as a rep, we're looking at getting some sort of travel pass for comedians, because they're always travelling off peak. and getting them substantial reductions on that. But I think the main thing is just making everyone accountable. This HR thing is really going to help make people accountable for the behaviour or actions if they've been untoward to someone.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And I think that's a really important reason why the industry needs strong female leaders such as yourself, and also, of course, strong female acts, and the buy-in from everyone to carry out that cultural change. I mean, you obviously are someone who is involved in that and feels passionately about it. Do you feel optimistic about that progressing in the way you would want it to?
Yeah, it is. It is definitely progressing. And the women in the industry are really good at mentoring and, taking them under the wing and looking out for them and offering advice. But I think basically, this is changing across all sectors, isn't it?
Yeah.
The whole Me Too movement, there isn't an industry that isn't going to be improved, is there?
No, you're right. And it's, I think it's so important, isn't it, that no industry sees itself as not involved in that process. And I'm really pleased to hear what you're saying. That, I mean, these developments that you're talking about sound very positive, and I think there's good reason to think that through the likes of the Women's Comedy Festival that's taking place in October, that you can continue not just to provide an environment which is safe, but also that gives this platform for female talent to come and grow and be nurtured and progress. Yeah,
and to know that the audience want to see women in comedy. It's a real safe space to perform and progress.
Well, as I say, we're going to make sure we've got details of Women's Comedy Festival on our socials. I know that a lot of this can be found on the Frog and Bucket website.
The womeninComedy.uk has its own website, yeah.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure we get that on. And of course, as well, the Frog and Bucket are doing some open air events this summer. Is that right?
Yeah. So Home, which is a fantastic arts complex cinema theatre in Manchester, they've built a 500-seater theatre outdoor space. So we've partnered with them, and I'm programming comedy on Sundays in there. And I've got the bigger space is allowed for better budgets and some really exciting lineups. Yeah.
And how, just from a business perspective, is this the first time you've done the open air stuff?
Yeah, I'm in Manchester. You don't choose to be outside.
No, it's not looking too good at the moment, is it? So, I mean, from a business planning perspective, were you driven to do this by the fact that your confidence in this demand being there was both, it was present and probably not sustainable to supply it just through the club?
It was, I think the main reason was spreading the risk. You didn't know if we're going to go into lockdown again, if they're going to be much more lenient with outdoor than indoors. So if you're really going to invest and push something, it seems safer to do that of an outdoor space than an indoor space. So that was the main reason. I think the second is when you're partnering with a different type of venue with different audiences, you're opening your brand up.
Yeah.
And the profile will come from that. And I think it's always really important to collaborate wherever you can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, that diversification of your options and spreading the risk, like you say, not putting your eggs in one basket, that to me is what successful business people do. They're always looking for what's next on the horizon. Yeah. And it's so interesting to hear that this is as alive and kicking in the comedy world as it is in my world. So again, we're going to get the details of the open air comedy for the Frog and Bucket on all of our socials. I can't believe we're nearly at the end. There's so much I wanted to ask you. Let me just finish with some generic questions. We talk about success on the podcast, but we talk it in terms of ups and downs. What does success mean to you, Jess?
It's loving what you do. It's being proud of what you do. And then real success, which is the hardest bit, is the work-life balance.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And do you think that because of COVID, we're talking about positive things, I've always thought before COVID, the phrase work-life balance was something that got sort of chucked around without really meaning a lot. I mean, a work-life balance is not finishing in the office at 4:00 on a Friday. It's being able to commit equally to different priorities. It could be family, social, friends, sport, hobbies. How do you hope that this concept of a work-life balance might change?
I think it's a presumption that if you're not sat at your desk 9 till 6, you're not as productive or efficient. There's different ways of working, and I think what's really important is employers now know that you can working from home, because I waste 14 hours a week commuting.
Absolutely.
So I was actually more productive in lockdown, not going to as many face-to-face meetings, maybe much more productive. So yeah, we've all definitely learned something about that balance during lockdown.
Definitely. And I think that story of I was more productive working from home I don't think I've had a conversation with anyone who hasn't said that. I think that's the consensus, that cutting down on travel time, wasted time and talking to someone about nothing every day, but still keeping that social element in through some form of flexible working. I hope that's what the new normal is.
I think hybrid working
absolutely.
is the way forward. We still need that face-to-face and time in the office, but it doesn't have to be 40 hours a week anymore.
No, I agree with you. It has been an absolute joy meeting you, Jess. Thanks.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks for coming on Success Won't Come Calling. It's particularly great that you're so positive about the future, because I've got no doubt at all that the Frog and Bucket as a brand and as a comedy institution is in really good shape under your leadership. Everything that you've talked me through in terms of the future sounds so exciting. And we're really pleased, aren't we, guys, that Jess has come onto our podcast. So thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So I found Jess's interview really interesting. I don't know about yourself. It was great to hear about, the struggles that she's had in lockdown and things like that. It was crazy to listen to how much she'd struggled and how much she come up on top of things.
Absolutely. I mean, there were two parts to the interview for me. I knew that I'd really enjoy Jess's stories about how the Frog and Bucket has been, it really has been the bedrock of UK comedy for 25, 30 years. And obviously the stories about the famous comedians who've sort of cut their cloth there, who've got their initial experience there, how they've developed. I knew I'd really enjoy that, and I really did. But no, I felt quite moved by Jess's description of the risk and the concern, the anxiety which was present for her as a business owner during lockdown.
Yeah.
Because you've got to remember, Frog and Bucket is a family business. I know, and Jess talked, didn't she, about how much she values her team and how, she locked the club up before lockdown because she was concerned about her team. And that was a wonderful thing to hear from a fellow business owner. You hear stories the other way around, don't you, of bosses who've kept pulling people in after lockdown because for one reason or another. But no, she was cracking. She's a great guest, great story. And as I say, not only did I find it very entertaining and interesting, but quite moving as well.
Yeah, no, me too. In particular, I was really interested to find out that John Bishop, a fellow Scouser, started off there in Manchester and only particularly went in and started doing his comedy sketches because he wanted free drinks. Can you believe that?
Well, I know. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard that story before, but Well, I mean, you're just thinking about it. You think, was John's success guaranteed after that? Because anyone who can walk in there with that measure of confidence and that level of assertiveness, and not least to mention that he had to get up on stage and be funny as well. Yeah. Fair play to him. But you know, I thought it was a lovely illustration of what the Frog and Bucket means to the comedy circuit, to the comedy industry, because nurturing new talent. And also Jess was so interested in, wasn't she, in terms of talking about the diversity of the comedians and of the acts that she supported. Her work with the Women's Comedy Festival, I think, really illustrates that.
Yeah, definitely.
And again, it's so inspiring to hear that there you've got a business and a brand which has been successful, but stayed true to its principles as well.
Oh, most definitely. I think it was really interesting as well to find out, you know, the struggles that women comedians go through, you know, like even travelling to and from gigs and things like that. And it's great that she was like really in support of helping them.
It really was, wasn't it? And I mean, just from my perspective, you know, remember back to when I did stand up. I mean, there was lots of late nights. There was issues around travel. The well-being of performers I felt wasn't always prioritised. Obviously, that was some years ago. It was great to hear from Jess the positive steps that have been taken in the industry since then. And it sounds like they're in a much better place. But you know, above all, Jess took the time to refer to the importance of her team at the Frog and Bucket, because great comedy and great entertainment and great businesses isn't just about the business owners. It's about the cloakroom staff and the security and the bar staff and everyone who's involved in building that business, that team. And I really got that from Jess. So just wearing my business hat, that's what I find inspiring in leaders, and she was definitely one of those. Yeah.
Oh, most definitely, yeah.
Great. Well, another great episode, guys. That's it from me and Stacey. Success Won't Come Calling is the podcast for people who want to be better tomorrow than they were today. I'm Simon Gibson, and I hope I see you all again soon.